Hi, good morning. Good morning. Welcome the panelists. Ludovic. So I have Ludovic Bodin from Kalibrio Capital. Hi. And Daniel Grech, who you just saw already. We'll welcome you back on stage. Hi. Hi, Ludovic. Hi. Have a seat there. Daniel. Hi. Hi again. And Gege Gatt. And Denise the Gaetano joining us on this panel. Excellent. So we are going to see today, and where's Denise? Hi. Hi, Gege. Hi, Denise. Welcome. Hi, thank you for coming. Today we're going to have a panel on how AI will plug into artificial wisdom, the emotional side, also the soft side of AI. How is it going to be integrated? How are we going to handle it? And also, hopefully, we'll discuss some controversial topics. So I'd like to start with Ludovic, who's working in finance. Please introduce yourself a little bit, and also tell us a little bit about how do you think that AI and emotion processing is going to work?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Ludovic Bodin. I'm originally from France, and that's my second time in Malta, so this year. I'm actually an investor, investing mostly in AI company, also blockchain, also actually advisor and investor in one of the company in Malta called Chili's, behind the company Socios. Investor also in another company that was actually presenting here called Fraction, which is doing a real estate stock exchange. And my main work is actually I'm working on a European AI fund, which is a €1 billion fund. I invest in healthcare, mobility, and environment. So typically Series B onward. One of the reasons why we actually start working on this fund actually is one of the potential consequences of the disparity between USA, China, and Europe. One of the problems of AI, it requires usually like a centralized approach, large amount of data, large amount of funding. And what we have seen in the last 10 years in tech, meaning like 80 billion euro or so a year invested in China, in a startup, 100 billion or so a year invested in the USA, only 20 billion euro a year invested in Europe. So the consequence of that, we have a lot bigger tech company from USA and China that we have in Europe. When it comes to AI, which is a new investment cycle that started maybe 2 years ago or so, the trend is even worse.
Yes.
Meaning that 90% of the investment made in AI is made between USA and China. So if you go fast forward this investment cycle 10 years from now, if we don't change the narrative, if we don't change the investment landscape, we will end up with most likely 90% of the leaders AI platform in healthcare and mobility and transportation and so on will actually come either from China and USA, which for me will have two dramatic problems for Europe. One is the concentration of wealth. The concentration of wealth is going to be most likely between USA and China, and Europe might significantly decrease his wealth. And second is actually the database that there is when it comes to AI. Like specific country, specific population, let's say from Finland, don't necessarily have the same genes and the same type of disease that people from China, for example, have, or people from Africa, or people so.
That's very interesting. That's a very interesting insight, actually. In fact, so one of the things that it's very interesting, the unintended consequences of AI in society. So, so I know you've been talking about risk-taking, Daniel. I mean, what do you think are the, apart from introducing yourself, what are the non-obvious implications and the unintended consequences of applying AI in society?
Okay, so just to introduce myself again, so I'm Daniel Grech, I'm co-founder of Wyzer. And Wyzer is a software company where we focus on building products, mostly utilizing AI and blockchain in the background, but without making like too much noise about it. So we focus more on solving problems using these technologies rather than moving into the hype of that, wow, we're using AI. So yeah, I've been interested in AI since I think, I remember once you lectured me, Angelo, about how Google actually works. And that was a very interesting lecture where you ran us through like the whole paper which had just been released by Google. And the fact that there's like so much information out there which is already available in a digital format, which is just waiting to be understood by AI algorithms and made sense of, was something that made me very keen on learning more about the topic. And in general, I'm interested in how pretty much most things which we know of today can sort of be automated in one form or another. So just as we've witnessed some physical tasks, so certain like factories and whatever, which are practically run with 0 people, I'm very excited to be part of this new wave of software now technologies, where we can kind of run entire businesses without needing a lot of manual interventions. So that's something that interests me a lot. When it comes to risk, I think AI is kind of a double-edged sword, so it's a bit of a tricky subject. So in general, the more complicated that things become, then the more risky that they are, so the more likely they are to eventually blow up. So in my opinion, when deploying AI in very risky scenarios, especially in areas related to social sciences, so when we're actually like have the potential to negatively impact people to a large extent, we need to be very careful when deploying these sorts of AI solutions. So it's one thing if you're automating a business process, it's a completely other thing if there's some guy's pension plan on the line. So I think, yeah, like when it comes to risk, AI requires a shift in mindset. So we need a different approach to actually measuring risk in these sort of scenarios. And
risk and risk obviously takes a lot of forms. I know that Gege you also work on healthcare applications, and I would like to see also, to complement Daniel's view on risk. I mean, how do you see the unintended consequences of applying healthcare AI in society?
Right, thank you, Angelo. EBO is a London-based organization, and we focus on changing the customer engagement model, particularly through NLP. One of the advantages that we have in Europe, which is a great challenge compared to China, is that we have a multiplicity of languages which we need to understand in every single institution. And healthcare organizations, because of the diversity we see in society today, are no exception. So AI has given us the ability to understand language, automate processes which were previously manual, and bring forth patient value in the healthcare sector or in the financial services sector, which we often work. Unintended consequences are part of the game. And perhaps, Angelo, I'll answer this question by widening the horizon beyond healthcare. I think this is an AI event. So let's buckle down around thinking, right? The most important cognitive function. Right? To a large extent, I think the unintended consequence that AI has ushered in is the reduction of critical thinking, right? So the better Google becomes at predicting our questions, the worse we become at forming them. A 2015 study has shown that students up to age 25 typically conflate their own knowledge with the knowledge available within tools that they use. So I think we're only starting to understand how AI is transforming society, and we need to shift our educational paradigm to make sure it fulfills our need to become better critical thinkers. I think AI does offer the relief from doing routine tasks which are boring, answering the phone, taking an appointment, following a map to get from point A to point B. But it is also eroding a degree of skills And I think it's important for us to be collectively aware of that and make sure that it influences our public policy on how we form society to coexist with artificial intelligence. And this, I believe, is one of the most important analytical points when looking at unintended consequences.
Are there any pitfalls that we should avoid, though, in healthcare specifically?
I think that one of the largest pitfalls which I see in healthcare, in AI, is the business mindset. This polar situation, whereby either you've got business adopters who feel, yes, switch on the AI switch and get rid of the humans, or those organizations which are on the other extreme, which is AI is something to fear because of job losses, which is intended consequence very often, so please don't bring it in. I think the problem with this all or nothing scenario is that it really trivializes the work which we're trying to do. So I think there are, two ways in which we could typically avoid this pitfall. I think from a technology perspective, so people like Ibo, who is actually implementing this technology in society, we need to take an iterative approach towards the way we roll out AI, whereby we put in a piece of technology, measure its benefits, and iterate and improve over time. From a business perspective, I think we need an entire re-education at board level to allow decision makers to appreciate the complexity of data science and take the right investment decisions. And it is when these two come together, which is the technology muscle and the entrepreneurial muscle, that AI can really become a transformative tool, which we all wish it to be.
And Denise, I know that you've been working in a number of in transforming different industries. What do you think are the non-obvious consequences and also the pitfalls of applying AI in society?
Absolutely. So I'll introduce myself first. I'm an AI and blockchain specialist, and I've been working in various industries, providing this specialty. And I also work with building and implementing business strategies to help businesses and brands take a step forward. So in view of your question, yes, first of all, in terms of the utilization of AI, in most cases, of course, we all know that the world is non-homogeneous. So it's extremely important that we understand that AI without oversight will take the phenomena for granted, or else also end up failing in terms of understanding that what works for one social domain, gender, or culture will not work for another, for any other. There's also the issue of personal security and privacy in terms of, obviously, it does not require too much technical acumen, but it does require a vigilant eye in terms of understanding what and how data of our customers is going to be utilized. Now, in terms of your question related to the pitfalls of AI, it would pretty much be that we're taking data points for granted, and we're also we're also ending up emulating humans to extreme precision, when in reality AI is there to help solve our daily problems rather than be a human.
And Ludovic, I mean, what pitfalls do you think we should avoid? And do you have any contrarian views to the common view of AI in society?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very myself investment oriented, and if I look at the ratio right now, for example, healthcare is something that is very close to our investment thesis and very close to our heart. You take a European company, for example, in disease detection, such as cancer and so on, and you take a Chinese company or an American company for the matter. When the European company receives €3 million investment, €5 million investment, the Chinese company will receive 50, 100, 150 million euro investment. So we're talking a minimum 10x more in the USA or China versus Europe. The European investors that I'm discussing with are like, oh, but what do they do with so much money? Well, they actually don't treat one disease, but 20 diseases, 30 diseases, 40 diseases, 50 diseases. And they not only detect a disease, but they actually develop a business around that, which means they're actually able to be in hospital, they're able to do the job behind just the technical aspect of disease detection. So my view is like, if Europe doesn't have a strong investment in the next 5 years, a lot of money is still going to be invested in AI and healthcare and mobility and so on, but it's going to be so little that most of these companies will actually disappear because they will not have the capability to build a business beyond the product. And one of the contrarian view that we have in actually right now, our group of investors, is Europe actually has a larger population than USA. Europe has a larger economy than China. And yet, Europe is satisfied today with a quarter, a fifth, a tenth of what is invested in companies in USA and China.
Interesting. Well, hopefully that will change. Do you see it changing anytime soon?
I see 2020 to 2025 being the moment of truth when it comes to AI and Europe. There is a lot of initiatives.
Why do you say that?
There is a new commission at the EU level that is basically leading technological investment. There is ambitions. There is a new teams who actually are quite, ambitious, young actually. But there is also a need to have more like a bottom-up approach. EU is very decentralized. EU tends to be quite political, and we actually need the investors and the entrepreneurs to be involved. So one of the reasons why I'm coming back to Malta is I'm actually very impressed by what the government has been doing, not creating the impulsion, but actually letting investors, entrepreneurs, such as you, such as Abdallah, and so on, executing on this intention. And that's what Europe needs to do right now. What Malta is doing is what Europe needs to do right now.
And Daniel, I mean, what do you think? What pitfalls do you think that we should avoid? And do you have any contrarian views that you want to share with us?
Okay, so I think when it comes to AI, so if you work in the field and kind of understand how things work, you get a point of view which is slightly different to the man in the street, kind of. So in a way, I see that as an advantage. So just to use an example, so I really struggle to wake up in the morning, I hate it. And traditional alarms just don't manage to wake me up. I can set 10 alarms, and they just don't wake up. So a couple of days ago, I said, let me try something new. And I downloaded an app which is like a smart alarm. And this kind of listens to your breathing patterns and wakes you up at the optimal time that you should wake up. Until now, it's worked for 3 days in a row, so I'm glad. But the way, coming from an AI background, I could kind of go through a thought process that, so I asked myself, all right, so what data am I actually giving to the app? All right, it's listening to me breathing. I'm fine with that. How is this data being processed, and does it make sense to give that data up in relation to what you're kind of getting in return? And to me, if it's just listening to me breathing, then I'm fine with it, and I can sort of at a high level understand how it works, so I decide to use that app. But without a sort of, I think without that kind of education process where the man in the street really understands how AI works, at least from a high level, people would just download the app, not think about it, let it run, and just take notice of the outcome. So I think we do need to introduce a bit more awareness as to, first of all, how AI works, and secondly, these sort of things. So if you're giving up your data, you should be happy with the trade-off between the data that you're giving up and the outcome that you're getting in return.
And Gege, I mean, what contrarian views do you have?
Yeah, I think the single word which underpins the answer to Ludwig's comment earlier about business adoption and investment is the word trust. The question is not how intelligent the machines can be, but how much control would we like to give them, and how much do we trust them? So the truth is, AI adoption, both from an investment perspective or from a user perspective, is underpinned by the amount of trust which we put in the system. And the truth, Angelo, today, is that we don't have wide and general widespread trust in AI. And my contrarian view really applies to how do you solve that? And because solutions come in twos, I will give you two ideas. I think the way we really need to think about trust in AI today is twofold, from a technology perspective and from a legal perspective. I think there's been a lot of work, and Malta has been part of it, as the European Commission too, in producing a quasi-legal ethical framework which will allow trust in the general society. I believe this is not a national problem which Malta needs to solve or the UK needs to solve. It requires international cooperation. I think the second area which we could think of to engender more trust in AI is actually technology. I think we need to restart our thinking towards AI, and not simply focusing on making AI better, being better in pattern recognition or better in statistical analysis. I think the future of AI is going to be thinking about the concept of causality, what causes a particular effect. And I think the perfect analogy, which is often used in this thinking, is the cheese grater story, right? You could probably pick one of your kids, Ludovic, give them a cheese grater, and by looking at the object and touching its holes, they will understand the cause that the physical form of the grater has. No AI out there today is able to extrapolate that connection between physical form and causal relationship. And I think from a technology perspective, if we deepen our development, our growth in that segment, AI could become more useful to us in society, and I think we'll be able to trust it more. And that's, I think, a legal solution to trust and a technology one which we need to implement.
Interesting. And Denise, do you have like any contrarian views that you'd like to share with us?
I completely agree with what Dave said, but there's also probably the aspect of bias, which can get into both facets. On one end, it's a question of we as humans actually writing the AI algorithms end up putting in some kind of bias in the algorithm itself, and or actually being able to remove the bias that we as emotionally intelligent humans end up usually have in our day-to-day basis when we're judging people.
And Ludovic, I think we're close to running out of time. I'll do like a very quick round. I mean, do you think that AI should have any form of emotional intelligence at all? Like just give like a 20-second view on this, a very short one.
Well, rather than purely talking about emotion, I think I would like to talk about culture. And specifically when it comes to European AI, I think there is two elements. One is decentralized, and the other one is alignment of value with European value. When it comes to decentralization, I see the only chance for European AI to emerge as an alternative and potentially even as a winner versus American AI and Chinese AI is actually to have a decentralized approach. If you take the European culture, we all come from different country, language, culture. But ultimately, we managed to work together in this decentralized manner. So AI is similar to how Europe has been built, has to be built in a decentralized way. The second part is on value, the cultural, the European values. There is one thing that in our group that's consists today of France and Germany and the Nordics, such as Finland, Sweden, and so on, who are all in our alliance. There is one thing that get us together. It's actually the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So these 17 goals about, for example, when it comes to environment, when it comes to healthcare for everyone, not only for the rich, like in USA. That's what Europe needs to work toward. So I see European values, I see European cultures that AI can be built on.
That's very interesting. Unfortunately, running out of time. So it's a good takeaway to take. I mean, AI needs to understand culture, needs to understand the social environment. We've seen that it needs to have some kind of emotional intelligence in order to be able to fit into society, to be more useful. What are the concerns? Is there a European approach that is better than in the States or China? We'll see. I think that what is very clear is that the national strategies in Europe need to enable more investment and better entrepreneurship in Europe to jumpstart this. So I would like to thank all the panelists today. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the Delta Summit.
Thank you.